Let's talk about shooting in low light mode. Now, although the Pocket 3 has a larger 1-inch sensor, this will help to get more lighting onto the sensor in lower light, but we still have to be aware of its limitations. First is low light mode, which adds some denoise to the image in camera. Be aware though, that you can only shoot in 4K up to 30 frames per second. And also, there's no choice to change the color mode. Its default is the normal color mode, and there's no D-Log M mode available. So if you shoot in D-Log normally, this also helps during low light because you'll have more dynamic range, meaning more range between the highlights or the brighter areas and the darker areas. The main issue to remember is not to be too tempted to increase the ISO too much, as you'll definitely introduce noise and grain in the footage. So even though the image may look dark on your little monitor, try not to go above between 400 and 800 for your ISO. Now let's see how to set this on the Pocket. So when shooting in low light, you could choose the low setting or the setting for low here. But what you'll notice here when in there is if you go to the settings on the side, you don't have any change for your color mode. The color mode is always going to be normal color. You can't do D-Log M, for example. So right now what I'm going to try to do is go to one of my other custom settings, and I'm going to go custom 2, which is D-Log M for 4K 30, and we saw that we have auto white balance on. Now what you would try to do is go to manual, and if you're in sort of blue hour, which is an hour just after the sun goes down, so it's still a little bit light but it's got that blue tone to it, or just as sunset comes up, you could be around 4800 or 4900, somewhere around there, and that'll give you more of a blue tone in the image, which is what we associate with nighttime. So we can hit that, for example. My color is D-Log M, which will give me more dynamic range. And my exposure, I'm at 1/50 for my 30 frames per second, as I explained. And I'm going to try to keep my ISO at 50 to 200. And then I can also click on EV. And my EV, I'm going to try to set to about -0.7. So that'll try to keep the EV around there, and will adjust the ISO within that range of 50 to 200. So we can take a look at that. Now the other thing I will also do if I'm doing any B-roll movement, I'm going to go to my custom setting again, custom 3, which is 4K 60. If we take a look at that again, my shutter is 1/120, and also I will set my shutter, my EV I should say, to around -0.3 with my range of 50 to 200. Now I can increase that a little bit if I needed to. And again, we would set our white balance to manual and set it to, as we said before, maybe 4900. So we set the other one to 4800. That's what we'll do. And now we would be ready to shoot in 4K 60 for some B-roll, where I could slow it down later on in post. Another thing you might be tempted to do, especially if you're vlogging, is to overexpose the image, trying to keep your face brightly lit. Just be aware of bright lights behind you. It might be better to adjust for them so they're not blown out, even if it makes your face a little bit darker. Because if you overexpose and the lighting clips are really overexposed, you won't be able to recover that in post. But you will be able to brighten up the shadows or your face later on in post. Just try to keep that in mind. Now let's take a look around and see how things look using the low light mode versus shooting in one of our custom modes using the D-Log M mode. So currently we're out, and this is what's known as blue hour. The sun has just gone down. So the sky is sort of blue. It's not quite dark yet, but the sun's gone down for the day. And one thing you want to watch out for is your exposure. So you want to make sure you don't clip your highlights. If you look behind me, there is a sign, and you might find yourself, if you're vlogging, that you look a little bit dark, and that's okay. So you want to set your exposure just for that sign so that it doesn't get totally blown out. And you can always increase the shadows on you later on in post. But if you clip that sign and it's in this shot, for example, you're never going to be able to get it back once it's clipped. I'm at like EV -1.3, my ISO is at 100. So here's an example where you might overexpose the sign, so the highlights. So just swipe left and then bring your EV value down to where you think you're not clipping, and see what that looks like. In the images coming up, we seem to have got better images as far as noise when we keep the ISO less than 400.